Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you so much.
Kris, you were in Victoria, I think, or at least monitoring online the swearing in of the new BC cabinet. What's your impression?
Well, I was monitoring online with the rest of us political nerds here in British Columbia, and while we like to wish everybody well and hope that they'll do a great job and work really hard, we were disappointed to see that, unfortunately, the cabinet is bigger and not smaller. Quite often we hear politicians say things like, we're all in this together. Well, we're really not, because most of us in private sector have had our salaries reduced, our hours reduced. Some of us have lost jobs or lost businesses, but most people in the government sector, including politicians, have not felt one pinch, not one little tap on the wallet. And so we were asking Premier Horgan to swear in a smaller cabinet and to reduce their pay by at least 15%. We went in with 22 cabinet ministers and 8 parliamentary secretaries, and unfortunately, we came out with 24 cabinet ministers and 13 parliamentary secretaries. It went in the other direction, and we haven't heard one peep about salary reduction. So we're pretty disappointed because this means that politicians aren't feeling that pain. And unless they're going to actually walk the walk and take a cut themselves and reduce their ranks themselves, how can we believe that they truly understand the impact of the policies on the rest of us?
What does a regular BC MLA make? What does a cabinet minister make? And what does a parliamentary secretary make?
Great question. So a regular MLA, your standard rate is around $111,000 plus benefits. Your cabinet minister top-up on top of that is more than $55,000. So that means that a cabinet minister makes more than $166,000 per year plus crazy level perks like housing, your food is covered, travel is covered, benefits, and you get a really big gold-plated pension as long as you hang in there for at least 6 years by the end of your term. Then if you take a look, for example, at a minister of state, so that's kind of a form of a junior minister, they make about, about a $30,000 top-up. And then if you're a parliamentary secretary, so that's kind of the third-rate type of a cabinet minister, you have about a $13,000 top-up.
Have they earned that money, and can they earn that money?
Good question. We think that there are well-meaning people in government, both on the bureaucrat side and on the political side. Whether or not they earn it, we think is up to the voter. What we're pointing out here is that the principle matters. And so if they don't take a pay cut, a reduction of at least 15%, they don't know what it's really like to feel that pinch because of what's going on with the COVID economic crisis. And they need to do that. And what's really disappointing is if Premier Horgan had done that, if he had reduced the size of cabinet on purpose and then said in his speech, you know what, we're going to, in solidarity with the working people of British Columbia, I've reduced the size of my cabinet and we're all taking pay cuts. We're in this together. He would have made national news by doing that. He would have probably inspired other politicians to do the same thing across Canada. He might have even made international news because the Prime Minister of New Zealand took a 20% pay cut, and she cut the pay of her cabinet and her bureaucracies by 20% as well. The leader of India took a 30% pay cut, same thing for his cabinet. Leader of Japan, 20% pay cut, same thing for the cabinet. But we're not seeing that here in Canada, and it's disappointing.
Well, we have, the impression that politicians are just in it to line their pockets and they haven't done anything to disappoint us yet.
And see, that's what the disappointing thing is, because we think that some of these folks do run for office for good reasons. They're well-meaning, and they think they want to help people, but they can't just keep collecting these paychecks while they're enacting policies that reduce the paychecks of the rest of us and then tell us we're all in this together. No, we're not. We get phone calls here every week at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation of people who are desperate, and it's hard to listen to. There are folks who have lost their jobs. Some of them haven't worked since spring, which is crazy. They're on the brink of losing their businesses, and they're deeply upset. And as we can see just with media reports, it's obvious people are struggling right now. And so that's why we're saying, guys and gals, you've got a pretty sweet gig being an MLA. You've got a very secure job, at least for the next 4 years, very generous pay, very generous benefits, good job security, and your CV, your resume, is going to be gleaming after this with all the contacts you build. The least you can do is cut your pay down a little bit and say we're feeling your pain. Just to give you an example, with a cabinet minister making $166,000 per year plus crazy benefits, the average working couple, so a family working in BC and 2 people working in it, make about $80,000. So a cabinet minister is making double what a 2-income family person is doing. So they're not hurting whatsoever, and we want them to at least take a pay cut.
The NDP during the election promised $500 for each British Columbian or $1,000 per family. Is that a grant that's tax-free? Is that a taxable benefit? If you're a high-income earner, do you need that $500? Is it a waste of taxpayer money?
Great question. That came out at a pretty questionable time during the election without much rhyme or reason. So it really smelled like electioneering, and we would say this if any party had said so. So that was quite up there. Whether or not it's taxable, they would have to check with the BC Finance Department, but to give you an example, CERB, which is national, that is taxable. And again, I warn people, if you've been on CERB, save some of that money. You have to bank some of it and wait, because in the springtime, the CRA is going to tax you for it. When they deposited it in your account, that came without any reductions taken off. Whereas with EI, employment insurance, they take off the deductions the same way that would have happened with a paycheck. CERB wasn't like that. It was just raw payment. So you must save some money for spring. Whether or not, I'm not sure if the $500 would be taxable. We'd have to check.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, in the really department, we have the Canadian musician Grimes, whose boyfriend happens to be the second richest man on the planet, Elon Musk. He's worth $126.2 billion US, which probably would be closer to 200 billion Canadian. Anyway, Grimes just received a $90,000 art grant. Does she really deserve that money?
No. And to be clear, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like Grimes herself had actually applied for this. It was her company, but she still gets it. This is on the government. This isn't the company's fault or the musician's fault. This is the government's fault. And it's indicative of how little oversight they have with these slush fund programs for quote-unquote arts and culture. She's one of the last women on earth that needs 90,000 loonies coming from average Canadian taxpayers. But here she is. She's going to get it nonetheless. And so it just speaks volumes about the lack of oversight and judgment and common sense when it comes to handing out this kind of money. Just to give you another example, we have something called the Mission Cultural Fund in Canada, and it's under the auspices of Global Affairs Canada, which used to be called Foreign Affairs Canada. And it has overspent its budget for mission cultural funding by $5 million. This is the same slush fund that financed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's trip to India. Remember when taxpayers paid for a chef to be flown from Canada to make Indian food in India? That was that fund. That's just one example of the misspending there. So yeah, we're unfortunately not surprised whatsoever that Canadian taxpayers have handed 90 grand to one of the tangentially richest women on earth.
Yeah, I mean, they had a child together with an unpronounceable name.
Yes.
I think just child support alone should be $1 billion or $2.
Right? That's got to cover some baby food.
And Elon Musk is a South African, American, and Canadian citizen, so maybe he owes us a little bit too.
Right? So I'd be curious to know if we got the CRA to say, excuse me, we're sending you this self-addressed stamped envelope. Could you please plunk $90,000 into it and send it back? Thanks so much. Be curious to know if he'd pay it back.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, the Ontario Auditor General slammed the Ontario government for its lack of preparedness for a pandemic, and also didn't feel some of the funds being allocated to it were being put in the right place. Doug Ford reacted by, "How dare you criticize my government?" Isn't that the Auditor General's job?
Yeah, the Auditor General's job, and watchdogs like those offices, is to keep track of the books and to find accountability where it's needed. Keep in mind that same Auditor General, that exact person in Ontario, was the one who uncovered the outrageous waste of money on the Ontario so-called green energy scheme. And it has bankrupted many Ontario businesses. It's one of the reasons why Premier Ford is Premier, because he campaigned on fixing this terrible mess with hydro in Ontario. Hydro became unaffordable for a lot of average working people, to the point where they actually coined the term energy poverty in Ontario. We had food bank lineups. I was hosting and producing talk radio at the time. People were calling in all the time that just couldn't afford their energy bills. And I'm talking, our own bill, for example, for just hydro, like lights and midnight laundry, not including heat, was more than $400 a month. And it was Bonnie Lysyk, the Ontario Auditor General, who blew the whistle on that largely and showed that it was because of these crazy schemes and contracts and markup fees that it was costing so much money. So if they don't like what she's saying, they need to fix the problem. So in essence, don't shoot the messenger, clean up the message and clean up the mess that she's pointing out.
The Ontario government has put a cap on how much food delivery companies can charge both their clients and customers. Is that a good move for taxpayers?
We usually like to allow the market to figure that out, right? Because otherwise, when the government gets involved, it usually messes things up. So the government isn't really good at doing a lot of nimble, reactive business. They're big and slow-moving and clumsy. And as Premier Jason Kenney had said just the other day, he said back in the spring that they did the wrong thing by trying to pick what was essential and a non-essential business. And he apologized outwardly for that. That was quite refreshing. Our point is here is that when government gets involved, often it has unintended consequences. So it's probably not a good idea to have the government arbitrarily imposing caps.
I know that you praise the government for kicking the CERB out the door quickly without questions, and then if you have to audit people at tax time, apparently Revenue Canada is going to be taking a look at something like anywhere between 80 and 200,000 CERB payments because perhaps they went to people who didn't deserve them.
Yep, and at the time, it was a major emergency, and we didn't want a lot of people to be left not able to literally pay their rent or buy food. So yeah, put it out quickly because it's an emergency, and then make sure that you follow up. And if they're following up and they're making sure that that money didn't go to people who didn't need it or didn't qualify for it for some reason, good. They need to make sure that they're keeping tabs on that.
I saw a report, Canada's 44 wealthiest people got $53 billion richer since the pandemic started. What's the Taxpayers Federation position on that?
Well, if they're generating wealth and they're wealthy people, quite often that's what happens with wealth. The same way, psychologically and market-wise, Stephen King seems to sell the most books. Quite often it's the wealthy people who continue to generate wealth. However, you need to make sure that if they're in Canada and they're Canadian citizens, that they are paying the proper amount of taxes. That's our only concern. If they make their own money and they're wealthy, go for it. Go forth and be successful. But just make sure that they're able to pay their taxes.
The Panama Papers showed that most former Canadian prime ministers were hiding money there from taxation. I don't know if that's legal or not, but have you heard of them being audited? And then what about the poor waitress who's living hand to mouth?
This is the thing. Quite often it's easier to go after the waitress who's living hand to mouth and see whether or not she's getting a 40 or a 60% discount on her lunch while she's working at the pub. That's, sad to see that sort of thing happen. Whereas the big stuff, I think sometimes it gets away from the CRA. It sometimes becomes too big for them to investigate. So we need to make sure their priorities and their resources are straight.
Do we have any idea how many billions are out there in unpaid taxes? And is the CRA doing a good job of trying to track it down?
I don't know the exact number. Every now and then you'll get a report that comes out that estimates or guesstimates how much is out there, but we don't know. We try to focus on what's happening within our own national borders and domestically, because right now we have enough to deal with individuals and small businesses and average property tax-paying taxpayers getting screwed over at the local, provincial, and federal level. As far as the bigger international stuff goes, that gets kind of out there.
Kris, do you have any opinion on crackdowns because of the virus, lockdowns, masks, and so on?
We're not doctors, so we try to stay out of public health opinions, but we do want accountable government. And accountable government is the government that is elected. So those are the premiers, the ministers, prime ministers, all that stuff. And we want to make sure that they are listening to their voters and their citizens. And we always, just as people, want to see fairness. So as much as they can do to keep us safe is fine, but man, they gotta be fair. And we get phone calls here all the time from people who feel that things aren't fair and that too much leniency is being given towards bigger corporations and that small businesses are getting squeezed. So we just really hope that the government is doing the very best it possibly can to keep us safe, to follow doctors' suggestions and recommendations, but know ultimately that the decision lies with our elected representatives.
In both Canada and U.S., well over 70% of jobs are provided by small business. Is it important to keep these small businesses alive if we're going to keep the economy and, I guess, a positive or a decent tax base going?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, walk up and down any main street in your city or your town, and those independently owned small businesses, they're literally your neighbors. Those are the ones that are donating to the Little League. Those are the ones who are showing up at your parent-teacher meetings with you. Like, they're your neighbors. And if they have a good small business running in your town, that is what helps make up the town. Quite often, we are the economy. The exchange of goods between free people is wonderful and essential. And so, I personally do all I can to try to support small businesses or locally owned independent businesses. And we get calls from them all the time where they're feeling really beset right now. Here in BC, it seems to be a more level playing field, but we're hearing more and more coming from other parts of Canada where people are in tough right now. So we just encourage everybody to try to be as fair as possible.
Kris, is there anything that you'd like to have our listeners know?
I just wanted to give a kudos and a shout-out. Burnaby City Council, according to their local news reports that looked great, they reduced their salary by 10%, Burnaby City Council, so mayor and council, and they took that 10% reduction and they put that towards funding meals for seniors. So we want to give credit and kudos where it's due. We like seeing stories like that. And in that same sense, that's one of the reasons why we're asking provincial and national politicians to reduce their salaries, reduce their costs, so that we really are in all of this together.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. Kris, do you mind if people contact you directly?
I would love for them to send me an email. They can email me at the letter K, Sims, so KSIMS, at taxpayer.com.
Or you can, if you have any questions for Kris, you can also send them to us at info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.